To really grasp the impact of this book, we have to start right at the very beginning with its promotional material, because it absolutely does not pull any punches. The author explicitly claims this is, quote, the book that will destroy the lies woven around the glorious Hindu resistance for 1,000 uninterrupted years to Islamic invaders of various hues. I mean, that is a wildly explosive thesis statement, right? The author isn't just trying to, casually add a new perspective to the historical record. He is stating a clear intent to completely dismantle and replace our current understanding of the past millennia. Okay, let's dive into this. Our whole goal with this explainer is to impartially map out this text. We are not here to take political sides. We're not validating, and we aren't debunking. Instead, we're going to look really closely at the actual architecture of Dr. Retnu's arguments. We'll explore how he structures his timeline, the very specific language he uses to elevate his subjects, and ultimately why this book is resonating so deeply as a modern cultural movement for its readers. To do this efficiently, we've broken the book down into 4 structured parts. First, the premise of Maharanas. Second, 1,000-year resistance. Third, key figures of Mewar. And finally, challenging historical narratives. All right, starting off with part 1, the premise of Maharanas uncovering the Sisodiyas. The primary intent of the author here is honestly incredibly ambitious. He sets up a direct, unyielding conflict between 2 completely different versions of history. On one side, we have what the book aggressively labels as a whitewashed narrative, which it describes as basically 70 decades of lies peddled by government historians. On the flip side, we have the author's proposition of absolute historical truths. He frames this as a glorious, uninterrupted 1,000-year Hindu civilizational resistance. So the entire book really operates on this core dichotomy of exposing falsehoods to reveal a hidden reality. And the language used to describe these historical figures, well, it is definitely not your standard dry academic prose. The text reads, the Avataras who fought invaders nonstop for 1,000 years, who endured all hardships, who refused to surrender. Now, by using a term like Avataras, meaning divine incarnations, the text explicitly elevates these rulers way beyond just being mortal kings fighting over patches of territory. It actually frames them as divine protectors, driven by Dharma itself to ensure the survival of Bharat, even if that meant living as nomads surrounded by enemies. Moving right along to part 2, 1,000-year resistance, tracing the timeline. So how exactly does the book build this massive historical canvas? Well, the author organizes the chapters chronologically to showcase what feels like a never-ending war. We start way back with the early invasions, where figures like Bapa Rawal repel Arab forces. Then we march into the Khilji era, marked by Rawal Ratan Singh and the tragic first Saka Jauhar. This flows directly into the Akbar era, highlighting Maharana Pratap's legendary fortification and the epic battles of Haldigati and Dwar. Finally, it stretches all the way into the Aurangzeb era with Maharana Raj Singh. The structural goal here is crystal clear. He wants to link these events, not as isolated regional skirmishes, but as one single, unbroken chain of resistance. Within this massive timeline, the book focuses heavily on specific, defining conflicts that involved immense sacrifice. We see entire chapters dedicated to the defeat of Iltutmish, the brutal assault of Khilji, the third sack of Chittor, and of course those defining battles of Haldigati and Dwar. It's really important to note the author's framing here. He utilizes very strong, emotionally charged language throughout the text, phrases like Islamic barbarism and Akbar's carnage. And he does this to starkly define the opposing forces and to really underscore the sheer existential threat that the Sisodiyas faced. All of this builds up to a highly specific chapter titled The Lies of 1,000 Years of Hindu Slavery. This is a massive pivot point in the book. The author dedicates this entire section to directly challenging a really deeply ingrained popular notion of continuous subjugation in the subcontinent. Instead of accepting a history of victimhood, the book attempts to replace it completely with a narrative of perpetual defiance and civilizational strength. Which brings us to part 3. Key figures of Mewar, the Sisodiya archetypes. To really sell this narrative of perpetual defiance, the author doesn't just give us a dry list of monarchs. He assigns them incredibly powerful, almost mythic archetypes. I mean, it's almost like reading a roster of superheroes. Maharana Kumbha isn't just a ruler, he's the invincible genius. Maharana Sangha becomes the spiritual warrior. Maharana Laka is the protector of Hindus. The book actively elevates these historical figures into larger-than-life heroes who are fighting for the literal survival of their culture. It's a highly deliberate stylistic choice designed to inspire total awe. Take Baba Rawal, for example. In the text, he is described as the conqueror of Arabia and the real father of Hindustan. For the author, Baba Rawal is the foundational figure of this millennia-long resistance. He's the guy who set the template of uncompromising valor that all the subsequent Maharanas would eventually follow. And the core purpose behind detailing these grand archetypes? Well, it's actually explicitly stated right in the book's introduction. The author writes that these stories are meant to remind the reader that, quote, honor and pride do not define the man, they are the man. By leveraging the legacies of historical titans like Maharana Pratap, the author is making a very direct, highly emotional appeal to the reader's sense of modern identity. He flat out states his intent is to arouse the sleeping Kshatriya spirit in whoever is reading it today. And that leads us to our final section, Part 4, Challenging Historical Narratives, the Modern Mission. To fully grasp what this source material is trying to achieve, we really have to look at the author himself, Dr. Omandra Ratnu. He has an incredibly multifaceted background. He is actually a practicing ENT surgeon, bringing what the book proudly calls surgical incisiveness to the study of history. But beyond that, he's a songwriter, he's an author who previously wrote The Hindus of Pakistan, and he's the founder of an NGO called Nimitikam, which focuses on rehabilitating minority refugees from Pakistan. This background is absolutely crucial, you see, because it shows how his present-day activism and his deep passion for Dharma directly inform this highly charged, protective approach to writing history. And his audience clearly views this book as a necessary weapon against established academia. Just take a look at this endorsement from physicist and author Neeraj Atri. He states, the author has presented facts with his painstaking work that will go a long way in dismantling the false narrative being perpetuated by government historians for past 7 decades. So for its supporters, this isn't just viewed as a history book, it's viewed as a vital corrective instrument. The overarching mission of the book really crystallizes when you look at the core themes echoing throughout the endorsements from prominent figures like Sanjay Dixit and Madhu Purnima Kishwar. Reviewing these, a very clear pattern emerges. The book is heavily celebrated for exposing a quote-unquote fake history, for framing the past as a life-or-death civilizational battle to save Dharma, and for actively attempting to overcome what the endorsers describe as a biased, anti-Hindu ecosystem. For its readers, this is essentially a handbook for a modern cultural awakening. Bringing this whole thing together, our analysis of the source material shows that Maharanas goes far beyond a simple recounting of old facts and dates. It is a passionate, highly targeted, modern effort to reshape the future of Indian historiography. By reframing the Mewar resistance as an uninterrupted, 1,000-year victory for Dharma, the book seeks to fundamentally alter how a civilization views its own survival and historical truths. Which leaves us with a truly fascinating, broader question to consider today. How exactly does revisiting and challenging established historical narratives shape our modern cultural identity? When the past is reframed that dramatically, how does it change who we see in the mirror today? Thank you so much for joining me in this structured breakdown. Keep questioning, keep learning, and I really hope this explainer has given you some compelling thoughts to ponder. Catch you next time.